Hey everyone, how's it going? For those of you subscribed to my channel, welcome back. For those of you who are new to this channel, welcome. My name is Crozo, or Crow for short. Something I've been enjoying recently is being able to revisit old PC games that I've played as a kid. Unfortunately, unlike PC games nowadays that are developed with the intent of lasting through generations of new OS and hardware iterations, games from the 80s, 90s, and even a number of the games from the early 2000s are much more difficult to set up on modern machines. Fortunately, for many of these, there are dedicated fan bases who develop mods, patches, or various other programs that will help these games run on modern systems, and sometimes add some extra features as well. Sometimes we're just lucky, and the game we want to play doesn't need all this extra help to run. Or sometimes the developers create a remaster for a game. A lot of old games I've played have been like this. Sadly, however, some games simply do not get any of these treatments. And I happened to play one such game this past November, Aliens vs Predator 2, and its expansion, Primal Hunt. This was one of my absolute favorite games to play as a kid, and I decided I wanted to share the experience on my Twitch stream as one of my nostalgia game streams, as I typically do with a lot of old games I've played. I had no idea though, how ridiculous my setup is going to be in order to accomplish this. In this video, I will walk you through the process that I took to get to the point that I could actually play this game and stream it on Twitch. I'd like to point out, however, that this video will not be the most ideal way to help you play the game yourself. You can certainly use it as such. I intend to provide enough detail in order for you to do so, but it's probably not going to be the best solution. The only reason I did it this way was because I wanted to play it safe with YouTube and Twitch, because I didn't want to gamble with a cracked copy of the game, or even a less than legal copy of Windows XP. Plus, I already had the original disc, so I figured, why not? If you have the original disc like me, but don't want to stream or record, you will be able to cut a lot of these steps out, but you will, at the minimum, probably require a spare PC. Fortunately, even a cheap $300 to $400 machine will be able to run this game. So of course, the first thing I tried was just installing the game on my PC running Windows 10. Because like I said before, sometimes we are just lucky enough for the games to work. The game installed just fine. Obviously, you have to decline on Games by Arcade and DirectX 8, but otherwise there were no issues. Starting the game works fine too. The game launcher appears and I get to work configuring the game in hopes of improving the chances of it running. Now these settings are important based on what I found on the internet, so I use them in all of my attempts to install the game. The first thing we need to do is check these three boxes. I can't give you an exact explanation as to why these three have to be checked, but I did experiment with the install that eventually worked, and I can verify that they are needed. Next, in the text box below, type plus windowed space 1. This will force the game to run in windowed mode, and I know a lot of people don't like running games in windowed mode, but there are two reasons for this. One, old games like this do not like sharing desktop spaces with other applications, even if you are using multiple monitors. This mostly applies to streamers and YouTubers, since they will be the ones trying to run OBS, monitor chat, and whatever else you guys might be using for your setup. But that's important because otherwise you're going to have your whole screen get rearranged the moment you try to run this game, and it's not fun, believe me. I've dealt with that many times. And number two, with Aliens vs Predator 2 specifically, the game has an easier time starting up in windowed mode versus full screen. In fact, a few times I've noticed the game just crash from full screen, but then when you change it back to windowed mode, it works fine. I don't know why, it just does. And once you type that in, check the box below the line just so you can make sure that that is executed every single time you run the game. Next, we'll go to display options and pick our desired resolution. Now, even though we don't see it right now, it will show up in the other build attempts. So I'm just going to say it right now. The highest resolution we see is 1280x960, and that is the highest resolution you should ever pick, even if higher resolutions show up. They will show up in the other two builds, but they don't show up in the Windows build. But regardless of whether or not they show up, only choose 1280x960. It's okay to choose a 16 or 32-bit, just go no higher than that resolution. Now there could be some tricks to get the higher ones to work, but I so far have not been successful with mine at least. And just for your awareness, the other resolution options you may see are 1400 by 1050 and 1440 by 1080. So now with those settings taken care of, let's go ahead and start the game. As you can see, the game seems to be working fine right now, but I'll go ahead and start a game so you can see the issues I come across. And we crashed. Now that happened sooner than expected. I did try a few more times after this, but I got the same results. I think this may be like some After Effects carried over from the very first time I attempted to install this game, and I was fiddling around with settings and stuff. I don't know. I don't know why I can't get it to work. At the very least, up to the point where it would normally break. Because the first time, I could actually at least start a campaign, and we could see the issues that would happen before I'd have to quit. And I tried various tricks, from using compatibility mode to using NVIDIA control panel, but the game ends up not working at all after a bit. And I'm thinking that's probably why I couldn't get it to run just now, is that maybe there's some lingering after effects from the very first time I tried experimenting with it. So my next attempt involved a Linux virtual machine running Ubuntu. The reason I chose a virtual machine was because it would be easy to capture on stream, since it would be on the same machine. I chose Ubuntu because in the event that someone watching this video wanted to replicate my attempts and were not Linux savvy, Ubuntu is very user friendly. I'm not going to cover how to set up the virtual machine. There's plenty of good guides online that tell you how to do that. I'm just going to focus on getting the game set up. I also pretty much do a lot of the setup through the command line because it was faster for me to do it that way, and I only recently decided on making this video. So it was easier for me to replicate what I did instead of finding a user-friendly way of doing it, which would have taken an extra couple hours to do to prepare for this video. There is definitely a more user-friendly way of doing it though, and the majority of these steps, they have user-friendly ways of doing it, especially on Ubuntu. But I'll do my best to walk you through my step-by-step process. First, we need to install an application called Wine. Wine is a tool that allows you to run Windows executables on a Linux system. It's not to be clear, it's not a Windows emulator. It just makes it so you can run Windows binaries on Linux. Next, we need to make a folder in our home directory and call it something like disk2 or something. Then we insert the second disk for the game. Once you insert the disk, click the notification to open up the folder location. Then click the three little dots and select Open in Terminal. This will open the terminal in that exact location of your files. We will run this command here to copy the contents of the disk into the disk2 folder. Alternatively, you could just copy the files from the GUI window in the disk and paste them into the disk2 folder. You will have to modify user rights and ownership for these files, because I think by default they are like root and have minimal rights, and Wine will fail to access them when it requests the second disk. The reason we have to do all of this is because Wine can't handle the ejection of a disk and inserting a new disk in the middle of an installation, like installing on Windows. Windows, you just change the disk, insert the new one, and it handles it just fine. Wine can't really handle that. To run the installation, first replace the second disk with the first disk, and when the notification pops up, click on it to open up the folder location. And as before, click on the three dots to open it up in the terminal. Once the terminal opens up, type wine space setup.exe and press enter. The game will now start the installation. As usual, say no to both DirectX 8 and Games by Arcade because they don't exist. Pay close attention to the progress bar. Once it reaches somewhere between 50-53%, it should prompt for the disk. It will prompt for the disk, but sometimes when using Wine, the prompt will appear behind the installation progress window. So if you suspect that it's waiting for the second disk, but you don't see the prompt, just move the window to the side and it will probably be under it. Once it does, just navigate to the directory you created, select it, and click OK. When it asks you to switch back to disk 1, that path to disk 1 should already be filled in, so you shouldn't have to type anything or change anything. But just in case you need to, keep note of the path before you change it to disk 2. And with that, the install should be done. Primal Hunt works the same way, except there is only one disk, so you don't have to do the whole disk 2 setup. Now to locate the game executable. I do this via command line, but it's possible with File Explorer GUI as well. Also, it's to my understanding that Wine has a supporting GUI tool, so that you don't have to do all this to get to the game, but I've never used it before, so I don't know how it works. But it can be installed the same way Wine was, whether by the command line or through the Ubuntu App Store. In your home directory, there will be a folder called .wine. It'll be hidden though, because anything prefixed with a dot is by default hidden. But once you find it, open it up, and inside that folder should be another folder called drive_C. Once you get into this folder, it should look like a normal Windows C drive layout. There should be program files, folders, and other things. You want to go to the programs files x86 folder, and inside there, go to the Fox directory. Inside there should be two directories, Aliens vs Predator 2 and Aliens vs Predator 2 Primal Hunt. Open the folder to the game you want to play. If you did this with the GUI, then after you open that folder, click on the three dots to open in Terminal. Make sure the disk for the game you want to play is in the CD drive, and use the wine command to run the game executable in the folder. In this case, I'm starting the base game, so I run wine space avp2.exe. Make the same configuration changes in the launcher like before, and then run the game. Now, unfortunately, with the VM installation at least, one of two things will happen. The game will crash, or there will be rendering issues. From what information I could find online, this is probably because with a virtual machine you do not have direct access to the video card, but instead a virtual video driver, and you are limited to at most 256 megabytes of video memory in VirtualBox. I read that supposedly VMware is different, but I didn't test it. The good news is that when the game didn't crash, rendering was the only problem I had when the game ran, which means I was going in the right direction. So I dug out my old laptop, replaced the OS on it with a copy of Ubuntu, and repeated all the steps that I just showed you for that I did for the virtual machine, minus the virtual machine specific steps. And the game worked great. No audio issues and no rendering issues. The only issue was, as mentioned before, if I didn't run this game in windowed mode, there was a high chance it would crash. But as you can see, it worked great and I was able to stream it. Now, as far as just getting the game installed and running, what I've shown you is what you need to do to get it working for yourself. And if that's all you care about, then be sure to leave a like if you found the video interesting or if you found it helpful. And if you know a solution for the Windows or virtual machine issues I described, maybe leave a comment below describing your solution. However, if you want to know how I set it up for streaming, then stick around for a bit. You're probably thinking that I just installed OBS on the laptop and plugged all my equipment into it, right? But no, because that would have meant an hour or more of configuring devices and audio, followed by debugging a bunch of issues I'd likely come across, and then finally, by copying all of my OBS image resources to the laptop. And I was not about to do any of that. I already spent so much time trying to get the game installed and running, that was just too much at this point. So instead, I dug out my HD 60S capture device and used that to connect my laptop to my desktop. For those of you who don't know what this is, it is one of many capture devices made by Elgato and is used by those who want to stream or record console gaming through the PC. It can also be used to capture other sources of video as well. The two HDMI ports and the USB on the device allow the video and audio to be split between the monitor output and OBS for your stream. This is what allowed me to play the game on the laptop while streaming it from my desktop to Twitch. The only tricky part in this setup was the audio. In order for me to be able to listen to the game audio while also forwarding it to the HD60 device, I had to install a program called, and I'm pretty sure I'm not pronouncing this right because I often mispronounce a lot of Linux programs, PAPREFS? P-A-P-R-E-F-S? I don't know. This allows me to create a virtual output device that will forward audio to all existing physical audio devices on the laptop. I installed the software via the command line as shown. Then I run the command, again, I'm probably mispronouncing this, PAPREFS, to bring up the GUI window. We move to the simultaneous output tab and check the box to add a virtual output device, and then we close this window. Then we go to our system settings and under sound look for the output device listed as simultaneous output. It may not show up at first after first time setup, in which case just run the command pulse audio tac k, which should restart the audio drivers and the device will show up in sound. Finally, because we have to run the game in windowed mode, we will have to modify the window size of the video capture object in OBS that is connected to the HD60. I explained how to do this in a video about streaming Knights of the Old Republic in windowed mode, but I will repeat it here. Basically, while holding the Alt button on the keyboard, you can resize the border of the OBS capture object without resizing the image in the process. This way you can resize the border of the capture around the part of the screen you need to capture and nothing else. Then after releasing the Alt key, you can resize the capture object to make it bigger and fit the screen. One thing to note is that AVP2 in windowed mode will not start in the middle of the screen, it will start a little bit lower. And if you move it to the center, when you restart the game, it will go back to its original position. So you would have to move it again and again over and over again, or go through the painful process of resetting your capture screen, centering the game, and then resizing your screen again, which is kind of annoying. Either way, it's kind of annoying. And that's it. That is how I set up AVP2 for streaming. It certainly wasn't a fun experience, but being able to play the game and even stream it was absolutely worth it. So if you stuck around for this last part here and enjoyed it, maybe even found it funny because of how crazy of an effort I put in just to play and stream this game, then be sure to leave a like. And again, if you have your own solutions for getting around certain issues mentioned in the video, or maybe even have your own funny story about trying to get an old game to work, share it in the comments below. Until then, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching.